Well, hello and welcome to this video, the 10 things I did to get my art business off the ground, part 1. And all of this, of course, was without social media or email marketing. Now, I'm not really sure why I haven't made this video before, because there are so many gems in my own art business story. And make sure that you watch part 2, because the 10th thing, I've actually got a prop that I've dug out from storage to show you, and it's the reason why I got into my very favorite gallery. Now, obviously at time of shooting, part 2 isn't out just yet, so make sure, if you haven't already, to subscribe and hit the like button if you're loving this content. And if it's at some point in the future, you will see a link directly below this one to part 2, so you can watch the two back to back. Okay, let's get going with the first 5 things that I did. Now, these are almost in the order in which they happened, or is it sort of as good as I could get them, but bear in mind that a lot of things probably all happened at the same sort of time. So the very first thing I did was get a business mentor. Now, I'd been a teacher for 7-8 years in schools, and I knew absolutely nothing about business. So it was super important that I learned, and I learned fast. Because at the same time as all of this, I was also a single parent. So I'd made quite a big decision to leave my full-time job and go out on my own as an artist. And I wanted to make sure I was going to get it right. So the business mentor was super helpful. The very first thing he did was give me a door-stopping business plan template, for which I completely had a massive meltdown. It was so enormous, I didn't understand any of it. It was full of financials and pie charts and all the sort of things you may already have seen out there yourself. And I went back the next week and I said, I don't understand any of this, please help me. And he got out a piece of paper and a pen, and he drew a 3 kind of stage business plan for me. And that's when the light bulb went on, I think. That's when I thought, oh, wait a minute, there is a way to doing this. I can understand it, I can make my own plan, and I can do it so it works for me as an artist. I attended live business workshops, and I remember the day I went into the one that was called Sales and Marketing. And I had a question at the very beginning, put my hand up and I said, excuse me, I actually don't understand. What does the word marketing mean? Those were the days. And actually it was probably a very good question, because he was able then to explain the difference between sales and marketing. But I was so green in those days. I had absolutely no idea. So here's the thing, a lot of you watching have got no idea either. You've probably come from different worlds, and learning business is really essential, because without a true understanding of what a business is, it's actually very difficult to operate and become profitable as an artist. The second thing I did, following his lead, was to go to business trade fairs. Now, yes, you might be thinking, oh my God, Sophie, what was that about? Well, I didn't know what I was doing. He suggested to me, let's get you a stand at this local business trade fair. I went, oh, okay then. So I took my artwork, I got some branding done really quickly. I got a logo done. I invested in a website really quickly. I invested in a banner and all the things I needed to set up a stand. And I went and I stood at a local business event, the only artist in the room. And here's what I learned. It was very confronting. It was a world I didn't understand. People were coming up and talking to me, asking me questions, and I had to think on my feet. And I really learned a lot that day. I mean, the first one I did, I learned and I thought, this is probably not the place for me, but what a great way for me to learn and meet people. So really the most I got out of those and I did more than one, I did a small handful, is I made connections, and that was the most powerful thing. If I'd stayed at home in my studio, I would not have followed the path that I did. So by getting outside my comfort zone, by feeling that sort of fear, if you like, that was what enabled me to take the next step. So the third thing I did was what we call face-to-face business networking. I attended networking events as an artist, by which time I'd become the professional artist. I'd got myself a suit, or I'd really dressed up, because I just didn't know what I was doing. So it was like, well, everyone else in the room is wearing a suit, I better try and get a suit. So I went and got myself a white linen power suit, and I felt very confident, and I started going to these networking events. And I have to say, at first, they were absolutely terrifying, right? You walked in a room full of people chit-chatting, you didn't know anybody, you had to go up and introduce yourself. It's all the things that you're probably thinking, oh my God, Sophie, I could not do that. You're probably thinking, you're very outgoing, it's probably very easy for you, it's all right for you. But actually, I'm not by nature, I'm an introvert. So to have to stand out and go and make these conversations and maybe interrupt two people that were talking and say, "Hi, my name is," was very uncomfortable. But I was highly motivated. I'd left my job. I had a mortgage to pay, car payments and bills and 2 children to look after. So I knew that I just had to go and do it. I just had to go and learn. So I joined local chambers. I joined women's only networking group, made so many friends actually when I think about it. There was something I think in those days called First Friday and Third Friday. I literally went to an event and I said, "What other networking events do you go to?" And that's really how I started to build the network and how I started to grow the contacts and the people that I knew. So that by the time I put on a show of some sort, I had some people to invite, which is key, right? I even found myself on the committee of the local Chamber of Commerce. Definitely not something I recommend, but I did it anyway, right? I just was putting my feet first and I was just trialing what worked, what didn't work. So the fourth thing I did was exhibit, 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 right? Here's where I made a ton of mistakes. I put my work in restaurants, in cafes, in local pubs, any venue I could find. I hired a space. I had a space, it had walls, I hired it. I found other artists, I began to meet other people, and I said, "Do you want to do a show? Let's do a show." There's a little tiny council building, I seem to remember, with a room upstairs. 4 of us or 5 of us put on a show for a weekend. It was a total disaster. But you know, the thing is, again, you know, nothing ventured, nothing gained. That was kind of where I was coming from. I didn't know any better. There wasn't somebody specific who could help me. I just had to go and do what I thought might work. And bit by bit, my kind of messy, imperfect action started to pay off. I made a few sales. And when I think back to some of that artwork in the early days, it was pretty awful when I think about it now. But it was what I was doing, I was putting it out there, and I was making some sales. But it all kind of changed with the 5th thing that I did. Again, I was working with the Business Mentor, the local Chamber of Commerce, and through my connections, I met somebody who said, "Oh, there seems to be a lot of artists in your town." And just for the Brits watching, I was not living in Brighton, I was very near Brighton. I was in a town some distance away. It wasn't the greatest catchment area, but he seemed to think, he said, "There's a lot of artists in this town. Why don't we put a press release out and ask for the artists to come and meet you in a kind of meeting situation?" And I was blown away at how many people turned up on that day. And that was the day I decided to do open house, we called it in those days, open studio we would call it now. And if I had a studio in my back garden, but we still seem to call it open house. I'm not quite sure why that was. I think that stemmed from a Brighton festival where people didn't have studios, they had houses. They opened the whole house, packed their stuff away for the month of the festival and did open house. And so I said to the people in the room, "Why don't we do something similar?" And I remember the first year that we filled my whole house with art. My art, other people's art, other people I'd met, people I met at that meeting. You know, began to grow this network. I had people with pottery and sculpture and weaving and mosaics. I remember to this day, and we opened up my whole house, my studio, the garden, all of it. And I remember sitting on the front steps waiting for the public to turn up. And they looked very strangely. It said, big banner, it said open house. Could we come in? Can we come in? What is this? You're opening your house, are we allowed in? It was a very, very strange first experience, but it went on to be the turning point for me in terms of sales, in terms of all the things I'm going to talk about in the second video. And again, it was terrifying. Suddenly I'm letting the public traipse through my house, and we had to keep an eye and make sure that things didn't disappear. You know, it was really kind of, we didn't really know how it was going to work, but I did go on to be a trail leader. I ran the trail in that town. It was associated and part of the artist open houses as part of the Brighton Festival. And so over time it became a trail that people came out to. And we used to have queues at the door on the opening morning. I remember looking out the window, my girls looking out the window going, "Mom, Mom, there are people queuing up waiting for the doors to open." It was a very exciting time. And then I went on to sort of fall into a routine of opening my studio I'm opening my house and studio 4 times a year. I would do the Brighton Festival, I would do something local in the spring here, autumn in the UK, and then I would do a Christmas one where we put on a whole event, and I had about 10 artists in the house, and we did mulled wine and mince pies, a log fire was roaring, and that was a very successful event. And then I would do a January sale where all the kind of odd bits, the bits I've talked about in a previous video in terms of campaigns, I would do that January sale, I think on the last weekend in January, and all the end of lines and all the bits we hadn't sold during the year. That was the perfect time where people could come in and get a bargain, and we could kind of clear the studio space out. So in conclusion, getting help from the get-go was absolutely the best thing I could possibly have done. And from there, I did a lot of messy and imperfect action. I wasted a lot of time, probably a lot of money as well, doing various different things, some of which I'll continue telling you about in the next video. And I think that's why I'm really so passionate about helping artists to not have to go through all those mistakes, to not waste all the time, waste all the money. And that's why I developed my 6 steps to success, so that you're cutting out all of the stuff that I did back in the day. And the 6 steps to success, lovingly known as my Art Biz Success Path, is part of the Art Business Academy membership. So if you haven't checked that out yet, there's a link again directly below this video. And to discover the next 5 things I did, how I got people to those open houses, attracted multiple buyers and went on to have a successful art career, then you're going to have to watch the next video. All right, thank you so much for being here, and I will see you on that next video. Take care, bye-bye.